Can you believe it? Halfway through this module, we will be 50% of the way through the course. That's fairly exciting. I really enjoy this. The sad part for me is I will meet some of you. I have met some of you at the orientation. I will meet some of you on campus because some of you do, even though you're taking the course via online. I do see you from time to time, but I really don't get the opportunity to know you as well as I would like to. It's always been a great privilege. You've been great for me because in my advancing years, I need to keep in touch with what the young group like yourselves are thinking. So we're now entering Mod 3, which is in my opinion, probably the most important module that we have in this particular course. It addresses two of the most important issues that community colleges are wrestling with. Oh, by the way, in April, second week of April this year, the American Association of Community Colleges, our mother group based at DuPont Circle in Washington, will experience its 100th anniversary. So yes, we've been around for a while. AACC, in the old days it was AAJC, then AACJC, and now AACC, had its first formal introduction to the nation in, would that make it, 1919. Okay, these two articles are from some folks that I think the world of. I have worked, not as long as I'd like, but I've worked in varying degrees with not all of the authors of the first article, but with two of them, and I've worked very closely with the authors of, both of the authors of the second one, and they're extraordinary people. Okay, looking at this issue, what is the issue? The issue is, how are we going to take an institution that is diverse? There's no other way to say it. We are the most diverse arm of all of higher education in the United States, community colleges, no doubt. But are we an equitable institution? Are we treating all of our hyphenate Americans? You have white Americans, they're probably still at the top, unfortunately. We have African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, international students who want to gain what American culture has to share. And sometimes the college doesn't do as well as it should. That's one of the reasons that I've spent the amount of time I have at Morgan, because the schools that are where I got my various and sundry degrees, most of them a long time ago, are not as advanced as Morgan is in dealing with this issue. One of the people who I was particularly, I'm waving at my granddaughter, great-granddaughter, one of the ladies who taught me a huge amount of dealing with the Hispanic culture. Even though I grew up with Hispanic folks, I didn't get to know their culture as well as I unfortunately say I should have. So anyway, Dr. Laura Rendon and Jaromo and Dr. Nora, the three of them, have done a good job with setting up a process that will ensure that the American Community College, they always have used this phrase, since I went to one, the open door. Well, too often, if you're not careful, that open door becomes a revolving door. And we're not going to want that to happen. You're going to meet a guy who is perhaps not as popular as he was 25 years ago, but his work still comes up. Dr. Tinto has an interactionist theory. There are lots of theories. I don't necessarily happen to subscribe to his, but it's still a good basis. Right now, I probably would, if I were to guess, would say that we've got at least 10 dissertations at the doctoral level at Morgan being written using Tinto and some of his supporters as the base for the dissertation research. So we're going to talk a little bit about this particular thing. His model is quite micro-focused, which is good, because it's too easy to be macro-focused and look at the big picture. Shakespeare in Macbeth said, don't get lost, so lost in the forest that you don't see some of the individual trees that make it so beautiful. Okay, so with that, we're going to see what role do we have to play as emergent leaders. You, the emergent leader, I'm sort of sitting back as the sage on the hillside, offering you advice as your career wends its way past me. Okay, we're going to look at the contributors. Like I said, there's a very nice student departure model, which it talks about why. And having been a campus person, I've never been a central office person, I've been a campus person both faculty, student services, continuing education, and instructional administrator. I've done pretty much the whole gamut. The student departure model, page 232 to 34 of our text, is best understood if you look at the algorithm. I told you before, I'm an algorithm person. That the algorithm is found on page 234. And as I said in module 2, please place yourself. Constantly remember that if you are not consciously straining the material you're learning through your personal life space, then you're going to be doing it unconsciously. And it's better you be in control than be, as it were, victimized by your own experiences. Not bad, but it's something I don't recommend. Okay, one of the things that I like, and I told you I'm a behavioral scientist, heavy emphasis in things that relate to sociology, political science, and economics. They bring up one of my happy topics in sociology called socialization, the process of becoming part of a given culture. And Tinto is not a sociologist. It's pretty obvious the way he writes, but he does talk about socialization. But he talks about socialization as a duality, as a two-part process, a macro process and a micro one. The macro part, yeah, I would agree with that, because we all have to be, to some greater or less extent, socialized into the culture in which we find ourselves. I had many changes to make when I left a relatively urban industrial community to move to a large urban metroplex, Detroit. Then from Detroit, I moved to an extraordinary rural community where there were more hogs than people. Where I am now, I'm functionally schizophrenic. Half of me is in a small rural suburb about 80 miles north of Baltimore, and then I'm spending 2 days a week in Baltimore itself. So that's all very exciting. But what we're using now in the sociology business is collaborative socialization, where when you're becoming socialized into Morgan, into as you change jobs, you bring to that a process where your skills, knowledge, and attitudes impact the culture you find yourself in, and in return, you are then impacted by the culture that you find yourself in. Okay, so that's critical to keep in mind. And one thing that Tinto and his successors have talked about is there are sometimes barriers that we're unaware of. They're called systemic barriers, meaning they're built into the environment we find ourselves in. And the readings you'll be doing for this unit, particularly the second one, will help you understand what those barriers are. And more importantly, how can you, with the unique, special expertise you have, can you help people overcome those barriers? Okay, another political dimension of all of this is, it's about the only place it's mentioned in the readings, though I will, in the text readings, but I will be sending you some, you'll hear the phrase often these days, OER, Open Educational Resources, and I've identified a number. The very first reading you did is an OER. It's an open educational resource provided by the Association of College, American Association of Colleges and Universities. That they said, please, it's open, use it. Use it as a tool to understand the world you're living in. And the thing that Tinto and his people present in this article is a phrase called the negative impact of the external community. What do we mean negative? Well, for every subset in the culture that the community college is part of, if those that are politically paying for it don't feel they're getting dollar for dollar, you'll hear about it. If the students feel that the college is not adequately preparing them for transfer or employment, you'll hear about it. If the college is too white, or it's too African American and not enough Hispanic, or for the white part not black enough, all those issues are by the people who pay for our existence. So we need to find ways to engage them and learn from them, because it's an interactive process. We help teach the community, but in turn, the community helps us learn more about what they need, because that's where we're there. We're an agent of positive change for the community. Okay, some might say that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but we'll explore its accuracy more in these readings, particularly the second one, but also in Module 4, and then you're going to explore it Yes, at least one of every module in your program will give you the opportunity to take leadership and to present to those of us that work with and learn from you whether we've been successful. So enough about that. We'll move on to the next part. The conclusion of the Tinto article is probably most essentially focused when you talk about how he concludes. And he asks, and this is material that you will find a little bit in his conclusion. Yes, he has a conclusion, not an implication, as one of your other readings did. But he does, in his conclusion, ask, okay, what are the whys, W-H-Y apostrophe S, what are the whys of retention? So what we're going to do, and pardon the pun, we're going to look at the whys, W-I-S-E, of retention as we segue into our second reading. The second reading is prepared by two of the best known hyphenate scholars in the United States. Shaun Harper is perhaps the best known, or co-best known, with Luke Wood for African American scholarship today. And Sylvia Hurtado is probably the best of the senior Hispanic scholars practicing today. And they're going to look at recommendations for how do we deal with this issue of making the college an empowering agent for not only people of color, but the other thing that enters into where another great area for, shall we say, difficulty of adaptation is you may be for the first time teaching a class or being a student success professional or even being involved with financing where you work with a county or a city government where you will be younger than the people that you are working with. Because remember, America as a society is getting older. There are certain parts of the culture where it's not. But on the East Coast, by and large, we are getting older. Move into the Southeast? No. Particularly states like Georgia and Mississippi and Florida, their populations are growing far more rapidly, than they are, say, in Pennsylvania or in West Virginia or in Maryland. So that's one of the big issues. And as we start to work with that, we're going to determine how can we deal with people of color and people who are older than we are. And of course, the other issue where there is a distinct problem, and that is gender. Much of my current research is being done in something called intersectionality. And I'm not going to bore you with that right now. We have several dissertations going on, privileged to serve on the committees, where we're really going to come up with some very good, unique stuff. Several of our scholars at Morgan are recognized national experts in that field. Okay, you will be dealing with all of these issues, and you will be expected, because of the unique experience you've had at Morgan, to be able to take leadership, emergent leadership as well as structural leadership, in meeting and engaging these challenges. So, what I want you to think about now is, as you look at how Harper and Hurtado conclude their chapter, it's not the beginning of the end. More likely, it's the end of the beginning. And we'll look at this in our last two modules. You will also look at it in the rest of the courses that you take. So, it's been an exciting experience thus far, for me at least. I hope it continues to be exciting for you. Thank you.